Welcome back to the Visually Hidden Podcast. This is episode 4. We've been covering horror movies all month long as we move into the end of the month. We've got Halloween right around the corner, so we're closing in on the end here. And today we'll be discussing selections from our third week, which include Misery, The Woman, Burke and Hare, The Ruins, Event Horizon, A Wild Card, and some Ghostbuster films just for fun. Joining us again for our Halloween adventure is Mr. Stephen Bendler.
Hey, what's going on?
And Mademoiselle Anne Milleville.
Bonjour. Hi.
Last week, we started out talking a little bit about horror short films. We've kind of been slowly building on this conversation throughout the course of this series. We started out talking about horror films as a starting point in careers. And then we talked a little bit about short films. And then we talked a little bit about short films as a starting point. We've been discussing along the way some of our own experiences with horror films and with short films. Last week, we discussed The House on Peach Avenue very, very briefly, and I shared a few anecdotes. If you want to check out any of these films, most of them are available on the Visually Hidden YouTube channel, so please go check them out and subscribe. One thing that came up last week while we were talking about Peach Avenue was writing, and we kind of glossed over that very, very briefly, and I just wanted to backtrack a little bit and talk about writing in general. With regard to The House on Peach Avenue, as I said last week, it came to me in a script bank. I was not the original writer of it. However, in the process of making the film, I felt I needed to get my hands dirty in the experience of writing. I needed to have a hand in the story. I changed the way in which the story was told, and I added a few other elements to just incorporate some of the assets I had come across, such as a hospital room. Anne and Steve, you both write, and I wanted to just kind of talk with you a little bit about your approach to writing. Steve.
Well, for me, I'm primarily an actor. So what I'll do is I will write some dialogue for a character, and then whoever that character's talking to, I'll kind of try to act out the parts as if I was playing both people. So how would that character respond to that thing that was said? And then take it back and forth. So I'll take on the role of both in my head. And sometimes I'll just riff off of what I intended to write and start writing it almost as an improvisation. And I say, okay, well, this one said to me, go to hell. And how would that character respond? And then I feel like you kind of get an organic flow. And then also I feel like you're getting, it almost seems like two very different people talking, where it's not just one author or one writer's voice, the same voice coming through both characters. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, I totally understand what you're saying. And what's your initial approach when you sit down to write a project?
I always have many stories in my head. Everything that happens in my life is an inspiration of something to write about. I'm the kind of person really overwhelmed by my emotions. So when something good happens in my life, I want to share it and I fantasize it. And when something bad happens, I can change the reality in my head and make it worse than it was for real. So that's the kind of thing that helps me to write stories. I always have many stories to write. I'm a dreamer. So I started to write at 9. It happens with things that happen in my life, but I change it to make it a good or a bad story. I mean, a sad or a joyful story. So yeah, that's the way it works for me. I always have things going on in my head. And I always want my writing to deliver a message of hope, or a message that could help someone living something rude in his life, how to deal with your past or your pain, your difficult moments. I always want something to be understood by my audience at the end.
What I find kind of interesting about both of your responses is that Steve started out talking from an actor's point of view and the characters, while Anne talked about the story and experiences and the takeaway. Those are two different approaches and two different elements that come together in the story. For me, myself, I don't know that I have a set starting point so much as ideas. And sometimes it will be an idea of a situation or an idea of a character, and then it just develops from there. I know a lot of people, they will sit down and they will just start writing what I call like the vomit out period, where they just like whatever's in their head comes out of their fingers onto the page. And some people they think that's good enough and they just go with it and they consider themselves a writer. But I feel that a real writer knows the writing takes work and that there has to be time for revision. And it doesn't matter who you are. You could be Ernest Hemingway, John Steinbeck, you could be William Shakespeare, and you still will have to go back and look at your work again and then revise and purge and tweak and tune and fix. And that was part of what I had to do with The House on Peach Avenue. And the person who wrote the original script, I don't know how much time they put into writing it. They may have just done a vomit out idea to have something in the script bank, which is fine. But I myself felt that this could have been tweaked, this could have been tighter, this could have been moved over here, or whatever the decisions that I made were, I then had to make them. And so I made maybe 2 or 3 passes on it. So again, it went from the original script I was given, and then I turned it into a straightforward narrative, and then I rewrote it from scratch. And then from there, I revised and tweaked it as we were filming it. So at least 4 drafts or 4 iterations went into that final product. I guess I'm just curious, as you guys take your journey through writing, and again, whether it's through character or through story, how do you finally arrive at your final result? How do you know when you're ready to perform it or present it or share it?
For me, since I'm really an actor, I never sit down and say, I want to write something and let's just see what comes out. For me, it's like, like Ann said, I'll have an experience or something will happen and I'll say to myself, that's actually kind of interesting. That's kind of cool. Maybe there's a story there. And then for me, the next step is, okay, well, what is that story, right? Like what's the point? Like if I'm going to write something, a play or movie or a scene, a skit, what is the point of it? Like, what do I want to get out of it? What do I want the audience to get out of it? So that's my next step. And then from there, I'll say, okay, well, this is kind of like what I want to say with this piece. To answer your question very directly, Pete, I had read something, I believe it was in a writing book, if I'm not mistaken. It says, if you're writing anything and you have questions that you can't answer about your story, the audience won't be able to answer those questions. So if you're writing something, try to be as objective as possible. And when you say, oh, hey, well, what about that? Or, well, how come that person went through the door instead of doing this? How come they got inside the car? If you test it by asking all the real hard questions, not just giving yourself a pass, like, oh, well, that's fine. That's passable. It's okay. No, really be excruciatingly tough on your work. And I think at the end of the day, you'll have a really bulletproof product.
Yeah, to answer your question, for me, I never feel that I'm ready. I always feel that I can improve something. But there is a moment when you wrote the raw story from A to Z. It's time to share because, as I said, I always want to write something with a message. I want to deliver a message. I want that selfish experience could help maybe someone else. And that's something that I really love about script writing. I'm not sure I would be able to write a book because that's the difference. The script writing is something that comes from the writer, and then you share it with a director, with a whole team. It's a collective effort to make your message a reality and to share it to the world, and hoping that it will talk to someone else. So, and as Steve said, if you don't have all the answers, probably people who will watch your movie will have the answers or theories about it. And that's what's magical in this process.
Yeah, it's interesting that you just mentioned script writing, and both of you are primarily talking about script writing. And there is, of course, the other side is prose or story writing, whether it's a short story or a novel or anything like that. I find that my approach usually begins at that point. I don't always sit down at the computer and open up the script writing software and start plugging in, interior, house, daytime, and then write my description of the scene and then start bringing in my characters. A lot of times my approach is I will do a first draft inside my head and I will just sit. It could be days, it could be weeks, it could be months. Sometimes it's even years where I'm just revisiting a story in my head before I ever put any words down. Sometimes I will make notes so I don't forget things. For the most part, my first draft is always in my head. Like I never just sit down and write. I usually think about it while I'm mowing the lawn or while I'm grocery shopping or while I'm doing dishes, like whatever. Like my mind is always working on the story while my body is like on autopilot. and I'm just moving through my day. And then when I sit down to write, I'll take my notes, and I'm very, very rigorous with it too. Like I usually do an outline. So like I have my structure and I know when certain things are going to be happening and when certain characters are going to be introduced. So I'm very, very meticulous with my approach, to the point where, like I said, my first draft is always in my head. So when I'm writing it, I'm always writing the second draft. And then from there, it will get revised and refined. When I finally get to the end is when I'm usually ready for some kind of feedback, but then it's only like inner circle. Like I'll never write something and then publish it, or write something and then go film it without having like anybody else look at it. And correct me if I'm wrong, or if you guys don't have this experience, but sometimes as a writer, you fill in the gaps like in your mind. You know the whole story, and maybe the whole story doesn't always come out on the page. And you need to make sure that the story is on the page for other people to see and experience. Just like Steve said about having all the answers. You can have all the answers as the writer, but if they don't come through, that's another problem or pitfall that you could experience. So even after I've done my second draft on paper, I will then give it to some close people to just read, to make sure that the story is there, the story is coming through. And then like I'll kind of do a little like feedback session with them and just ask them like kind of debriefing questions, where it's like, all right, well, what'd you get from it? And then they tell me, and it's like, okay, good, that's what I wanted you to get. Okay, did this make sense? Okay, good, that made sense. Okay, but you don't know why they did that? All right, then I gotta go and like make it clear why they're doing that, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I need to share with someone before really I couldn't publish right away something I wrote, because I'm like you. I mean, I can have the story in my head for years, especially as you know, I'm writing a series. And the series, it's been 10 years. I have the idea from the beginning to the end. And sometimes when you start writing, you have it in your head for so long that sometimes you have some scenes, you miss some information for people who don't know about it. So it's good to read once, twice, 3 times, 4 times before asking your friends to read it. And then they can even find something wrong in your story, even if you read it 3 times or 4 times. For my writings, I always focus on the characters more than the event of the story. And in my head, I have the whole past of my characters. So sometimes I can refer to something in their past, but I forgot to talk about it in the beginning of my story. So it's not really clear for someone who is not aware of the whole story. I hope it's clear what I'm saying, but
Yeah, I agree with that. There's like 3 or 4 people in my life that I'll send stuff to. You're one of them. I've sent you like, "Hey, I wrote this song," or, "What do you think?" Because I know that you're gonna be brutally honest with me, and that's what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for someone like, "Oh,
Hmm.
what a great job." I don't need that. I have a mom for that.
Yeah.
I need people who are gonna, like, tear it down and tell me what's wrong with it, so I can fix it. Because I mean, at the end of the day, I know that my friends aren't trying to hurt my feelings, or crap on what I'm doing, but I need them to be honest, so that this thing that I'm trying to give so much of my time to actually comes out the way I want it to. And I think like one of the things that stops me from writing most of the time is I will have a very clear vision of a story or a song, or whatever it is that I want to accomplish in my head. And then the fear is that I won't be able to translate that to the audio recording, or to the page, or to whatever the medium is. So that makes me a little bit apprehensive sometimes, because I see it so vividly, and I think it's so good the way that it is. I get tentative about putting it anywhere else, because I'm like, I don't know if it's going to come out as good as I wanted, or I hope that it will. Yeah, you could kind of drive yourself a little mad sometimes with stuff like that. You get that Beach Boys Pet Sounds kind of chaotic thing going on in your head, where it's not good enough, delete, then you have nothing. So I feel if you take some time, you let it breathe, you let it digest, and you go back, like, you know what, that wasn't half bad, but I could change this, or I could add that, or I could raise the stakes, or I could create some tension. Or so I think if you give yourself some time, you can then be able to recognize the opportunities you can take with the story.
Of course, a wise man once said, we all go a little mad sometimes. But as far as a revision goes, that is something that really can't be forced and can't be rushed. It's something that is almost a collaborative part of the process because you need that feedback. And it doesn't always have to be loving feedback, and it doesn't always have to be harmful feedback. And a lot of people don't even have that skill set. And it's something that really just needs to be developed over time. Just like writing as a skill set, the criticism end of it really needs to be worked on as well, because it's a creative process and it's something that you yourself made. So again, to have people come in and just start like shitting all over it is not the greatest feeling. But if you created a toilet bowl, what do you expect people to do in it? You know what I mean? You got to be realistic about what you're doing and what the result is and how people are going to see it, because that determines how they're going to treat it.
Yeah, I think that's the point. But I feel like a baby for me. It's my writings are my babies, and when I share it with someone, it's like having my firstborn child going to school for the first time. So I feel like I'm losing it. I know it's for good, but I feel I'm losing it. So I'm scared and I'm a bit upset. But yeah, that's I agree with you on the release. It's something that you need to let it have its own life. Your work can have its life by itself then.
I find that whenever I'm in that situation, I always just, reiterate to myself, it's like, well, you know what? They may not be the audience for that particular story or that particular project. So you really have to approach it with the mindset of like, all right, who's your ideal reader? Like, who are you writing for?
I don't know if you feel the same, but I write for me first. Maybe I'm selfish, I don't know. But I first write for me. Every time you write something, it's a part of you that you're going to share with the world. And you hope it's going to resonate to other people. But first of all, maybe I'm the only one to think that way, but I write for me. It's a release of my mind. And sometimes I don't share what I wrote, but when I share it, I hope what I felt will be something that could help someone somehow or resonate for someone else.
That's totally cool and fine and correct. I mean, you should always write for yourself unless you are, a journalist and you're trying to write for the people of your community, but as a creative writer, you're writing one for yourself, but then if you intend to share it, you should have an audience in mind. And for that, you should have an ideal reader in mind. And that's somebody who you're writing for after the fact. It's like you're creating it, and so you're writing it for you to get it out of your system and satisfy your mind and your soul or whatever. But after that, when it's on the page, who's it for? Is it for your grandma? Is it for your neighbor? Is it for your pastor? Is it for your teacher? Like, who is the audience? Is it for children? Is it for adults? Is it for horror fans? Is it for romance fans? Is it for sci-fi fans? Like, who is your ideal reader? Who is going to appreciate this piece of work the most? And then you give it to them and make sure you're firing on all cylinders, you're covering all your bases, and you're hitting all your marks. That's what I'm getting at with the ideal reader. Of course, yeah, no, you always should write for yourself, because if you're not, then you're really just a whore looking for a pimp, aren't you?
Well, it's not unlike comedy, right? Like, know your audience. I write children's books. I write horror movies. I write dramatic scenes. I write, family-friendly Christmas plays. So it just depends on, what area you're going into, what genre you're going into, and then really living in that area.
The one thing that I've always believed is that limitations inspire creativity. That's something that I've used as an approach for most things, especially in the independent filmmaking world, but especially in the writing world. And that's kind of where the idea of the microfiction 250-word story comes from. When you only have so much, what can you make with so much or so little? Rather than continue and make this a podcast exclusively about writing, let's use this to segue into our first film, which is about a writer who has a number of limitations bestowed upon him. The first movie this week was Misery from 1990, directed by Rob Reiner, based on a book by Stephen King, adapted into a script by William Goldman, and it stars James Caan and Kathy Bates. I've read the book a number of years ago, and I remember really, really enjoying it. It's a very quick read. I believe it's only about 338 pages. After reading it, I rewatched the film. And again, this is about 15 years ago that I read it and watched it. So I have not seen the film in 15 years up until last week. And I gotta say, I remember watching the film after reading it and thinking, gee whiz, the book was so much better. Like, it's not bad, but it's not the book. And now I've watched it again after 15 years, having not recently read the book, and this movie's awesome. It's a lot of fun. It's very well made. It's very tight. It jumps right in with both feet and it just takes you into the situation. It really doesn't waste a whole lot of time getting you up and running. And then from the point when the character played by James Caan realizes the situation he's actually in, the fuse is lit. And the rest of it is just like tension and suspense, just watching that fuse burn, waiting for it to reach its mark. I really enjoyed the film. I watched it with my wife who had never seen it and she had no idea what was coming. It was really funny. We watched it with a neighbor of ours who I had loaned the book to. So she read the book, came over and watched the movie, and we're sitting there watching the movie, and it gets to right before Annie is about to tune Paul up. And my wife was like, I have to go to the bathroom. So I was like, no. So we paused the movie because we knew she did not want to miss that. But in the book, the situation is a little bit different and the outcome is a little bit different. I'm not going to spoil it for anybody because I really think it's worth reading the book. Not that it's not worth watching the movie, but I really think you should definitely check out the book. It's one of his shorter books. It's only 338 pages. There are a couple of character nuances that change it up, make it a little bit different. So even if you are very familiar with the film, the book has something else to offer you as well. Steven, I know you're a huge fan of this film, but you have not read the book. So that's another reason I'm just handling this with kid gloves. I do not want to ruin it for you. I strongly encourage you to check it out.
I might have to just bend and read the book. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I'll send it to you for Christmas.
All right.
So while you're snowbound, you can read Misery. Good way to spend a season.
It would be, actually.
What's your experience with this, though? You told us last week you've watched this film like 50 times, and I know you've seen the play. So
Yeah, I mean, I love this movie. I probably have seen it more than 50 times, honestly. It's something that I've watched from a young age. My uncle had a habit of renting videos and then never returning them to the video store. So I had a copy of Misery, and I just love this movie. I got in so much trouble as a kid because I would bend all the bobby pins my mother had into little Paul Sheldon keys. Like, stop bending my bobby pins. She'd lose it. But I was fascinated about making that key and seeing if it could work. The cast in this movie, albeit small, is incredible. Richard Farnsworth is amazing as Buster. I mean, Kathy Bates, Jesus, the Academy Award, well deserved. James Caan is always fantastic. The pacing on this movie is incredible. I know you had said, like, once that fuse kicks in when Paul realizes the situation he's really in, I happened to glance at the DVD player, and that's at exactly 30 minutes into the film. I mean, the pacing in this movie is impeccable. The music is great. The direction is great. Just the tone, the texture. This movie, I couldn't recommend this movie more to people. I absolutely love this movie.
Yeah, I loved it too. Well done, as you said. I really enjoyed the Annie's character, so played by Kathy Bates. As you said, Steve, she really deserved an Oscar because she really goes from the nice lady who saves a man. She's a nurse and she lives alone, but she's a big fan of him. So yeah, you really feel she's a nice lady, and she turns out to be evil. so yeah, she's really fantastic. And I guess that was the message in the movie, but it made me thought of what we said about Alien the other day. You were like saying that Alien 2 was the best of the saga, and for me it was the third, and for you the third was the worst. And it's really the way I understood this story. It's, should an artist write something to please his audience, or should he write something he wants to write at the risk of losing his audience? Because that's the thing. He wrote what he wanted for Misery, but the big fan didn't want that, so she became mad. So that's the same thing about Alien. They could have done a third film like the two previous one, but they tried to do something new, and the fans didn't recognize the saga in it. That's the way I understood your point of view.
Well, I think that's a good point. You know, this is probably a little ahead of its time now. I mean, when you think about the levels of toxic fandom that are out there, I think Annie Wilkes has got to be up there as one of the biggest toxic fans going. And she's got this guy captive, and kind of do what I want with this film, or or with this book rather, or you're going to pay the price. So it's that's interesting. Pretty ahead of its time.
I remember when the film came out in 1990 because there was a lot of promotion behind it, a lot of publicity, and it was all over the video store. They just had a ton of copies of it. They had the poster hanging in the window, and the poster for this film is so simple and so evocative. It's such a brilliant, beautiful poster that just pulls you in. It's very intriguing. It's the lone cabin in the dark, snow-covered woods with the typewriter font just says misery.
The character's misery, but then he's going through misery writing her, and then he's really going through misery being with Annie Wilkes. So I think, yeah, it's got a couple different meanings in there. I did see it on stage. It was very fun to see it on stage. I didn't agree with everything the production did, but I got Bruce Willis to autograph my playbill, so that was awesome. And Laurie Metcalf, she was great as Annie Wilkes. I mean, she's not Kathy Bates. That to me is almost a perfect performance. But Laurie Metcalf was really great, and there was just a lot of cool things to see on stage. The whole stage, the entire thing rotated. It was on a spinner, so when Paul's taking the wheelchair through the rooms, the stage is turning as Bruce Willis is rolling himself through the doorways. It was so cool, and the slightest mistake, a half an inch in the wrong direction, that door's clipping him and he's falling off the stage. I mean, pretty precise how he got through those doorways. It was kind of cool to see when she's racing back. You see her headlights, and he's like, it was really cool to see on stage.
Mhm.
Yeah. So.
And I have a stupid question because you said it was in Broadway. It's not a musical, right?
No, it was just a straight play. Yeah.
Because I imagine someone like, "Oh, I'm gonna break your ankle,"
We could put that together. I'm sure we could work on that. The love ballad, "Oh Paul," it'd be good.
I remember while we were watching it, like there's a point in the movie when she first kind of peels back her mask, so to speak, and you get to see like the woman behind the mask, and it's all in her eyes and in her delivery and her tone, and they do it in like a really intense close up, and the lighting just brings it out as well. It's just so exceptionally well made. The story of this troubled woman. And speaking of troubled women, our next film is The Woman from 2011. And this one came to me as a recommendation from my cousin, who is a big horror fan. Usually, whenever we meet up, he's usually just running down a list of films I've either never heard of or haven't seen. And the last time I saw him was this summer, and he had mentioned this film, The Woman. So I was like, oh, okay, well, Shocktober's coming up. Let me just throw it on the list. And I was a little apprehensive about going into this one because, again, I didn't really know much about it. And my cousin has made some suggestions in the past that maybe were not the most entertaining or enjoyable. He seems to like, let's just say, the more graphic and more messed up fare of film. However, I started this film, and again, I didn't know what to expect other than what he told me. And I gotta say, I was sort of surprised by this film. I don't know that I loved it, but I know that I didn't hate it. And there is some interesting elements involved in it. There's definitely some interesting approaches with the character and the execution. It really is a different kind of horror story.
I'm not sure I'm going to watch it again, but that's the kind of movie I want to share with my friends. I want my friends to watch it and give me their opinion about it. But first of all, great actor's performance, really. Except maybe the teacher. I don't know what you think about it, but the teacher was not as good as the other cast. That's my opinion. And what I liked about this movie is the way we see women characters, the complexity in women characters, all of them, especially when the father introduced the white woman to his family. You see the look between the mother and the woman, the daughter and the woman. They understand each other even if the one is the white one, but there's kind of a connection. There is fear, but there is understanding at the same time. So I think it was really powerful, this moment, especially the mother. You understand that she fears the woman, but she understands her and she feels for her, and she kind of want to help her. Even without saying anything, you understand that there is a connection. So really, I love this movie just for that, and I was super surprised that the director is a man. It's what I said about Babadook. I think it was 2 weeks ago. When a woman directs a movie, you understand, because Babadook is made by Jennifer Kent, and you can feel the connection between the characters. And I think it's really typical of a female director. And that's why I was so surprised that this movie was made by a man, because when I watched it, I didn't see it was a man who directed it. And then when I saw his name, I was really surprised, because it's really well done. But what I didn't like, the way that men characters are treated. So that's really crazy, because a man directed this movie, but I felt like all men in this movie are bad guys. Even the potential boyfriend at the very beginning of the movie, I don't know if you remember, he talks to the daughter in the pool, is such a jerk. From the beginning, you're like, okay, so this guy is a bad guy. Then the father, you quickly understand he has something wrong in his head. And the son is doing the same thing as his father. I mean, he's about to become like him. And that's something I hate. As you know, Pete, I'm a feminist. I really do a lot for the feminist cause. But this kind of movies, that's what I thought about the movie Barbie. I don't know if you watch it, but just saying that woman has some values and not men, it's not my idea of feminism. So for me, the way we can make the feminist cause move forward is to show that we are just human beings before being men or women. So we just need respect on each side. That's my vision. But yeah, that's what I didn't really like about this movie. That's why I can't say I love this movie, but the way they talk about women is it's wow, fantastic. I loved it for that, but yeah, I can't love the whole thing because of the way they treat male characters.
I hated this movie. I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't like it for a number of reasons. Number one, it's just boring. It's just very, very slow. Yeah, we know the dad's kind of a douche. We don't know exactly his whole deal, but just right off the bat, just the fact that there would be some kind of woman like that in the wild currently, I don't buy it. Like Anne said, right? Anne's a feminist, right? I like to think that I'm a feminist, but I'm original recipe feminism. I'm not this new wave feminism, right? So it's like that's one of my other points that like and I agree with Anne. The treatment of all the male characters in this film, they're all garbage, right? Even the creepy janitor who's smoking cigarettes under the bleachers with the teacher, like even he's kind of like a creep. If you've got to go that far in the other direction to prove how bad men are when not all men are like that, it's kind of defeating the purpose. And yeah, I did see Barbie, and that's a whole dumpster fire. I don't even want to talk about at this juncture. But if you've got to go to those lengths, if you've got to fabricate outside of reality, then your point is invalid, in my opinion. And then I feel like the undertone message there was that men are evil, and that if their treatment towards women isn't evil, that they can turn women against each other. That's kind of what I took. I didn't connect with this movie. I thought it took a really long time to get to the bloodbath. That clearly is what he wanted at the end there. Nothing particularly stood out to me as like, oh, that's kind of cool. So for me, this one was a complete miss.
This film is from 2011. It's the middle part of a trilogy. So there's information we don't have going into it. There's information we can speculate on leaving it, but the first one is called Offspring from 2009, and then this film, The Woman, from 2011, and then there's a third one called Darlin from, I think, 2019. I will say that I watched this film with my wife, and very surprisingly, she loved this movie.
Really?
Yeah, I am still trying to completely wrap my head around it.
Sleep
But
with one eye open, pal.
she, yeah, but I don't exactly agree with Steve. I think part of it is because I sort of knew the setup from it. I didn't watch a trailer, but my cousin kind of gave me a synopsis. So I kind of knew what I was watching and where I was going and what I was looking for while I was watching it. Steve, did you watch a trailer before you sat down to watch the
Oh,
movie?
no, I avoid trailers at all costs.
Okay, so then you went in completely blind
Yeah.
and deaf, like nothing working for you. So for me, I didn't have that slow burn experience. I always hate that term slow burn. I feel like it's just an excuse for like not enough story and not enough editing. But I feel like this film doesn't necessarily apply to that because if you know it's about a domineering father who is trying to inflict his, I guess, views on not only his family, but on the world. And he wants to dominate this wild woman that he finds in the forest. Then you can kind of start to see the psychological profile on box throughout the first half of the film. I wouldn't even necessarily agree that, I mean, yes, it was a bloodbath at the end. However, prior to that, we do have the situations of her in the cellar that are not exactly pleasant. And even with the son tormenting her, he's just a little psychopath in training there.
Yeah.
And even from the beginning of the film, he's watching his little sister get picked on at that little party that they're at. He doesn't step in at all. He just watches and then goes and shoots hoops. So you can see right from the get-go, like, okay, something's wrong with that kid, especially since that's the brother. And then he gets into the car to talk with the father. He's basically just a spy for the old man. So there are crumbs sprinkled throughout that first half. I think if you know what you're looking at or what you're looking for, it might be a different experience. I do agree that all of the male characters are just fucking abysmal.
Yeah, and that's where you lose me. If, like, you wanna make a point about, um, a portion of the population, okay, that's I'll take that point. But when you've gotta go
Yeah.
that far out of reality to make the point, then it's like you've kinda canceled yourself out there.
That's definitely the biggest flaw, I think, of this film is the lack of balance in the characters and their personalities. I think the women characters are all really developed in their own way. They're very strong and they have their own backgrounds and baggage, but all of the male characters, you could get a cardboard cutout
Yeah,
and put them in there with like an angry face drawn
right,
on
and
it
that's and si
and just have them be whoever.
and that to me is why I think the film just doesn't work, is because of that. Because if you
Mm,
had a male character in there that was interacting with the women in that family, who was a genuinely nice person, and you saw because of the fear and the manipulation and the control that the father had, they couldn't make the decision to try to escape. But you never put anyone in there that was good, where you show the
mhm.
struggle of like, man, I really want to be with this guy or escape to something better than what I have. I just felt it would have been stronger to see the control that his father had. But then, like I said, the third act, he just kind of goes on his rampage and starts fucking beating the shit out of people. And, I don't know.
The film is definitely not without its flaws, but I do think there is some value in the story. And like Anne said, she doesn't know if she likes it, but she wants to share it with her friends. Like, I feel like this is a film that people could benefit from watching, if only to dissect it and deconstruct it and maybe help each other try to understand it. There are a lot of intangibles within the story that I think different people can pick up on and then bring together to make a cohesive understanding out of it. And again, it's the creative work of somebody else. The director, he also co-wrote the novel that the script is based on. I'm sure he probably has the answers that we don't, and between the three of us, we can kind of come together on some of them, but I feel like there's more to unpack in this particular story because it does deal with a lot of relevant topics and of course feminism and then the outlook of people in general. And yeah, a lot of times people do see things black and white. Maybe that's not so much a flaw of the film as it is part of the criticism of society. It's like you're an extremist and you're either this or you're that. It's thumbs up or thumbs down. It's 5 stars or it's no stars. That's a big part of our society right now. And so I feel like this film kind of touches on that. And then as you watch it and you experience it and you share it with others, then you kind of start to find that middle ground. It's like, oh, well, yeah, no, this movie's bullshit and I hate it. Well, yeah, but it had this, this, and this. Yeah, that's true too. For me, honestly, the worst part was the lack of male characters. it would have been a lot more interesting if the teacher was a male teacher, I think. I
Yeah.
think that would have changed the whole dynamic and presentation of especially the third act. The thing that kept knocking me out of the movie where it's like I'm like trying to go through the door and it keeps pushing me out. Like I'm trying to get in to like enjoy and experience this movie and it just kept like saying like, no, you can't come in here. Was the music? It was very distracting and I don't think it was mixed particularly well and it was a little cheesy in my personal opinion. They had all these songs by this one artist who was kind of sort of illustrating and highlighting the story. I would have been much happier if it was just a simple score.
Yeah.
You know, I felt like I was kind of watching some bullshit half-assed music video or the whole vibe of the movie actually gave me a sense of not amateur filmmaking, but amateur storytelling. Like I almost felt like I was watching a film directed by a teenager.
Yeah. I can see that and I agree with that. And the other thing that bugged me was how many close-ups of her staring. I mean, Jesus Christ. I get it. She's staring. She's a wild woman, you know. I got all that, but like the eye close-ups, it was like okay, it was getting a little repetitive for me. Like there was no other creative shot in that movie.
That's something I loved.
Oh, sorry, Anne.
Because you see the emotions through those shots. I feel that way.
Yeah.
But in European movies, we always have shots like that.
Yeah, but I don't know. Most of those shots though was just rage. You know, there was a couple of them where obviously she felt some other things and all that, but too many eye shots for me.
It's not even so much eye shots as it is the absence of language. And so she's communicating physically and visually. I think when her and the mom are locking eyes as the dad is trying to like clean her and the mom picks up the board and the woman is kind of looking at her very intensely, you know, you could tell that she's saying something with her eyes. And what she's saying is, do it,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
do it, do it.
Well, that to me was the most interesting part of the film. I agree with you that the teacher been a male, a positive male role model, that would have created some balance in the film. That would have created some reality in the film for me. And I would have liked a little more character development. You know, like because going into it's like, why is the mom and all them so afraid of this guy? Yeah, he's a douche, but like to what degree we don't know. And then you find out at the end.
I think you can get a sense of it through watching the film. And again, my experience as I was watching it, I kind of saw him as like something's off about this guy. And he's like, he is a phony.
Oh yeah.
He's like a little too perfect. So I got a sense that no, there's something wrong and I'm just waiting for it to happen. And then of course, when he abducts the woman, it's like, why aren't his family reacting differently? So then it raises a lot of red flags. So I don't know that we had the same experience there. I would be curious, Steve, if you did revisit this one down the line, knowing it now, what your experience is. Again, because we've talked about like how I didn't watch Misery for 15 years and I thought the movie was great. But after I had read the book, I was like, I'm curious, like what time will bring to this story in your mind.
I don't know. Like I said, I mean, I see all the red flags. Because obviously there's something off the first frame he's in. I just think that it was most of it. I shouldn't say all, but most of it was pushed towards the end. If we got some more of him being vile towards the wife, somewhere in the middle, just a little bit more, because obviously he's chained up this woman, so something's not right with the guy.
Well, didn't he like punch her in the face while he was brushing his teeth?
He slapped her. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm just, maybe I just don't like it, but I just feel like it was ineffective for me. And I just feel like the messages were just like a sledgehammer to my head.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to watch it so you could discuss it with us.
Yeah, no problem. Our
next film was Burke and Hare from 2010, directed by John Landis, starring Simon Pegg and Andy Serkis. And this was one I was told about a while ago, and it just took me so long to track it down. It wasn't exactly readily available. Eventually, I was able to track it down this year on a service called Tubi in the United States. And again, I love John Landis, and I love Simon Pegg, and I love Andy Serkis. Like that was like the reason I wanted to see this movie. I was familiar with the Burke and Hare story. It is a true story, except for the parts that they made up. As stated in the very beginning of this film. So it is a comedy. It's a comedic approach to this story. And Personally, I found it to be a lot of fun. It was enjoyable. The comedy was good for me. The performances were really good. I thought the direction was really good. It showed to me that John Landis, while he's not as active as he used to be, he still has the skills he needs to deliver a film that can be entertaining and or funny. There were a lot of good things that I found worked, especially with the editing. The story moved pretty swiftly, and even through the editing they were able to bring out some laughs and some comedy with the timing and delivery of certain things. So for me, I enjoyed the film. I don't know that everybody would enjoy this particular film, but as I said, I really like John Landis and the other people involved. For me, it was also really good to see some of the actors pop up throughout the film. Tim Curry is in this film, and this was his last live action acting performance. Tom Wilkinson was in it as well. Even some of the background character actors and some of the Simon Pegg, early in his career, he did a show called Spaced on the BBC, and some of the actors from that show appear in this film as well. So for me, it was kind of fun to just see that little reunion of actors working together again to bring about something that they clearly enjoyed doing. So I think that came across in the film as well. You could just tell that the people working on it enjoyed working on it. So
Yeah, I like this one. I enjoyed it. I got Mel Brooks vibes from this one. It was just like Mel Brooks's kind of sensibility, the timing, the jokes, just the material. I mean, all around top-notch cast. You can't go wrong with them. I mean, great performances. You got a hint of the old John Landis, the American Werewolf in London with some of these sections, some of these sequences.
And even some of those cast members pop up as well,
Yeah.
from American Werewolf in London. It was really a lot of fun to just watch if you're familiar with his filmography. And yeah, I also, as I was watching it, I got a Mel Brooks vibe, but it was kind of like Mel Brooks meets Animal House meets American Werewolf in London. Like it was very exciting as a film geek.
Yeah.
And John Landis fan to watch this particular one.
Yeah, so I enjoy this one. It was even though it's about grave robbing and dead bodies, it was a lighter night in comparison to some of the other films we've watched. So yeah, I think if anyone's got the time, definitely check it out. It's definitely worth the watch.
Yeah, pleasant movie, I would say, but that's not the kind of movie I could watch again and again. To be honest with you, I didn't hear about this movie at all before. I didn't know the main actors, so I'm sorry. It's really not the kind of movie I would have seen in theater. But I must say that the story is pleasant to watch. I like the hangman at the beginning and at the end of the movie. At the beginning, it tells you the context of the story. At the end, he makes a good ending. So, yeah, I liked it, but it wasn't so awesome to me. I must say that the historical sets were really realistic. The costumes, the corpses, very realistic. And that's the kind of story we have in France. We have many stories about that time because medicine, the way the medicine progressed is thanks to creepy stories, you know. So we know about that.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the fact that the female characters maybe are second roles, but really important in the story. I liked it because when you see the posters, you see two guys, so you think it's going to be again a men movie. But I like the female characters. Both of them are really important and really well written.
And you got Pollyanna McIntosh, who is the woman, plays Mary in this movie.
Yeah, I don't know if you caught that, Anne, but the very tall brunette woman who is part of the Macbeth production was the woman from The Woman, Pollyanna McIntosh. So
Ah,
we had
okay.
a
No, I
Pollyanna
didn't get
McIntosh
that.
double feature this week.
Ah, wow.
Yeah, I realized that after I had programmed and scheduled the films. I was looking through them and looking through the cast, and I saw her, and I was like, "Whoa!" It was nice to hear her actually speak. And again, just to throw back to The Woman, I think that she did a really good performance, regardless of your feelings about the film. I thought her performance as the woman in The Woman was a good performance.
I was just gonna add that, yeah, she actually did a great job, so I can't say there were no good performances. I don't actually, I don't think there were bad performances in The Woman. The
Yeah.
material I didn't care for, but yeah, she's great. I mean, my first experience with her is The Walking Dead. So she's a very gifted actress, no doubt, and it was nice
Yeah.
to see her, even though her role in Burke and Hare was a small one. Her couple of lines on the stage were very funny. So it's nice to see range from anybody.
And her delivery and her presence. I mean, she is a very tall, well-built person. But yeah, Burke and Hare, I would highly recommend it. It's only about 90 or so minutes. There's a lot of laughs, but there's also a really interesting story about actual history. Again, they take liberties with it to make it entertaining, but I don't think you'll be disappointed, especially if you're a fan of John Landis films. If you're not familiar with John Landis, of course, he directed Animal House, The Blues Brothers, An American Werewolf in London, Coming to America. So if you're familiar with any of those particular pictures, I think you'll find something of value in this. So next we checked out The Ruins. And this is one, again, that I saw with that same cousin who recommended The Woman, but I saw it about 12 years ago when I was staying at his place. I was working on a writing project, and he again is a big horror guy, so we watched this film, and I remember thinking, like, it's not your typical horror movie. It's not a haunted house. It's not a killer in the woods with a mask. It's a very different kind of horror film and horror story. It's based on a novel, and it's the same screenwriter. He adapted his own novel for the film, and he changed quite a bit of stuff between the two stories. So again, it's just talking about the right medium for your story and the right presentation for the characters and events. In the novel, things work differently than in a visual forum. So I would recommend checking it out if you're looking for something a little bit different. But let's hear what Steve and Anne has to say. Let's let Anne go first this time. Anne, what's your takeaway from The Ruins?
So, as you know, I don't like horror movies. So, for me, the beginning of it, it's a typical horror movie, the beginning of it. So, at the beginning, I was like, oh my God, it's going to be long. But actually, when they see the well, it starts to be interesting. So, yeah, the story, it's original for a horror movie. I agree with you on that. And the thing I didn't like, of course, the feminist I am, uh, the woman parts, because okay, they're always screaming, they're whining, they're crying, people get killed because they're stupid, and that's really the kind of thing I don't like to see. They are hysterical, and the hero, he looks like an outsider at the beginning, but at the end is the smartest guy, the one who can control this unreal situation. That's typical of a American teenage movie that I don't really like. But except that, except all of this, it's an okay movie for me. It's okay to watch it. If you like horror movies, I think you're gonna like this one.
Yeah, I really like this one. I had never seen it before. I had heard of it, and I like Jena Malone. I've seen a couple of things that she's done, but I really like this one. What I liked about the beginning of the film is that the minute I saw a group of teenage friends, I was like, oh, geez, it's going to be one of these. They're all idiots, and they're all doing something wildly stupid and inappropriate and whatever. And I was like, oh God, okay. But then it surprised me. It wasn't that thing. It was still a group of friends, and they were doing something that's questionable, but at the end of the day, it wasn't that questionable. They wanted to sightsee, and they wanted to get, like, as our lead guy says, let's get a little culture. Let's go see these ruins. And I've been to Mexico, and I've been to the old ruins, so it was, not these specific ruins, not Little Shop of Ruins, but I've been to the ruins before, and it was cool to see them. Like, I get it. Like, you want to go see them. I've lived that, right? And then they're like, oh, well, here, this path is covered. Let's go down this path. Like, that's, I'm like, nah, you get back in the car and you go home. You don't do
Hmm.
that. I thought the suspense was good. It's like one of those, like, well, who's going to survive type of things, and the dangers coming from this unknown source in this unknown place.
I'm glad that you guys both had that experience with the opening sequence at the resort with the young cast. It is kind of really good misdirection because it does set up these characters, and it is a contemporary horror film. I mean, I think it was made in 2009, and it's produced by DreamWorks, so it's not like an independent film company. It was a studio that released this film, but you don't really hear about it too much. I don't know. I don't even remember like when it came out. I saw it after the fact when it was on television. The cast and the setup for it, yeah, you have four people in their early 20s and they're on vacation, and yeah, you think like they're just going to be, I can't wait for these kids to die. Like, that seems to be the nihilistic approach that a lot of people have going into horror films. It used to be the characters were strong and developed and you connected with them, so you were experiencing the terror that they were experiencing. And then at some point it turned and became, oh, I can't wait for these characters to die a horrible death. I am rooting for the bad guy. The bad guy is the star, and I'm no longer scared. I'm a closet psychopath in training, like, let's kill these
Well, I'm,
bitches.
I'm glad you brought that
And
point up, because to me, that's a fail. If I'm watching a horror
yeah,
movie and I'm rooting for the people to die, you failed.
exactly. And so with this film, I didn't experience that. In the beginning, it's like, okay, whatever, like getting to know them and seeing their relationship. But as it went on, I was really scared for them especially when they start to piece together what's going on. It's like they're not stupid characters and they're not horrible characters. They're not horrible to each other insofar as their own personal nature. Their experience causes some of them to do some things that maybe aren't the greatest ideas to do to your friends. However, it's part of that journey and it's part of the horror. My one problem with the film is probably the ending. It has that happy Hollywood American ending, and I don't know that for this particular story that should have been the case, but I feel like they probably had it at some test audience, and test audiences didn't want to see young Jena Malone get mowed down or executed. Or I believe there is an alternate ending of the film that they shot where like she looks in the rearview mirror and you can see the vines or something moving underneath her skin, and like that would have been, I think, a better ending.
Yeah.
However, they probably wanted to please the audience, so whatever. But again, it's based on a book that has a lot of different stuff going on in it, so it could be worth checking out as well.
Yeah, I didn't need a happy ending on this one. I thought for sure that, if she got away, that there would be like, it would end with some kind of news report about this thing spreading across the globe, or at least in the United States, like more impending doom. I thought that's where they were going to go with it.
Yeah, for me, it's not a happy ending. This movie wasn't happy at the end, so it's not a happy ending. Because, as you said, I expected that maybe we could understand that she was affected by, the thing, the plants, sea plants going out of her back or something like that. And I don't get the moral in the story, because the most annoying one, she's the one surviving. So I don't get the point. If the guy, I don't remember his name, the main character, had survived, yes, okay, it's a happy ending. But this girl, especially this one, you don't want her to survive.
I feel like for the horror audience, it would have been better to have that tragic ending. It's not like The Thing insofar as the story and what's going on in it, but in terms of like the theme where these people are in a situation, it's a no-win situation and it's something that's out of control and it has to be contained. I feel like that comes across in the story, and for the way they ended it, it was just kind of cheap and it was Hollywood, and it was not the ending that this story deserved. I feel like all of the elements were there for the audience to be satisfied with the sad tragic ending and have it be more impactful. And I feel like that may have made people talk about it a little bit more. Sometimes it isn't the happy ending that is more successful. Like the original Planet of the Apes film series. Every single one of those 5 movies has a downer ending.
Yeah.
And they made 5 of them. So you think about that when you're working on your story. It doesn't always have to be a happy ending, and sometimes that's the safe road that isn't as successful as the controversial ending or the ending that gets people talking. Sometimes it's better to go a little bit darker because, again, we're watching a horror movie. We have expectations going in, and the fact that our expectations were not met and deceived kind of made it more enjoyable. So to not have that happy ending that we're expecting, I think would have really been like the cherry on top for this particular film.
Yeah, I agree with you. The ending probably hurt this movie a little bit, and maybe that's why it's not as remembered.
The next film, Event Horizon, Steve, you missed the boat on this one.
Yeah, this one wasn't available.
It's been around for a while. I believe it came out in 1998, so it's about 25 years old, but Anne and I are going to discuss it very briefly. I had seen this film a long time ago. It came out when I was in high school, and I remember a lot of people talking about it. I had seen this film a couple of times, and of course, it has Laurence Fishburne, it has Sam Neill, it has Kathleen Quinnlan. It has a really good, strong cast. The film itself, I remembered it being better than it was on this particular viewing. I don't think it held up as well. It's almost a cross between Hellraiser and Alien. And it's funny enough, the director of photography was the director of photography on Aliens, who was the focus puller on Aliens. So clearly he brought a familiar sensibility to the picture and presentation. The story itself, there's some supernatural force that's tormenting people on a spaceship in deep space. I feel like the cast is the saving grace of this particular film. I thought the performances were really strong, and Laurence Fishburne is probably at, the head of the pack in this particular film. And you've never seen this one before. What was your experience with it?
I even never heard of it. So I didn't like it, to be frank with you. For me, it's a cheap alien movie. There is no alien in it, but I had the opportunity to watch 4 alien movies for this podcast, so now I can compare. And yeah, it's definitely a cheap one for me. The special effects are mediocre, and the only 2 positive points are the cast, as you said, fantastic cast. I love Laurence Fishburne, so if you like him, it's a good one. And also the psychological aspect on each character, because this is definitely what the story is about. So you have an idea of what happened in their life, how they dealt with it. So yeah, that's the part I liked. Otherwise, it's just another story in space. I'm not really a big fan of those kind of movies.
It's worth watching as a curiosity, but again, there are better films out there for you. Of course, the cast is what really makes it interesting, and I agree with Anne. The psychological aspects and the motivations for the characters are interesting. I feel like it could be better. I personally wouldn't mind seeing a remake of this particular film if they developed it a little bit further, but it just feels very, very dated. It feels like you're watching a movie from the late 90s, and even like the end credits, it just has this like weird rock industrial techno pop song, like Prodigy song playing throughout the end credits that has like no place in the film, no place in the story, and it just adds to that dated factor of the film. The special effects, again, they aren't the greatest. The makeup effects are pretty good,
Yeah.
but the special effects throughout the ship leave a little bit to be desired. There are people who have a very strong fondness for this film, but I think they may just be remembering their initial experience with this film in the day. I'd be curious to hear from people who have liked this film consistently, or people who revisit it, what their experience is with it. So if you're one of those people, please give us a comment. Let us know what you think, because I am very curious. I can only base it on my experience and what Anne has to contribute. I don't know that we're selling it for Steve. Really.
Well, I think I remember seeing commercials for this movie way back in the day, and nothing about it jumped out and grabbed me, which is probably why I never watched it. So if I see a commercial or a trailer for a movie and it doesn't really do anything for me, I don't have the time, and with all the things I want to watch, I don't have the time to go exploring.
I think we'll just move on from this point now, and we'll talk about Friday and our wild card. So anybody want to go first?
I watched Five Nights at Freddy's.
Okay. I'm not familiar with that at all. I know it's a brand new movie.
Brand new movie. It's based on a video game that came out almost 10 years ago. It's about these animatronics that come to life and they kill people. My son is super into the game, He's super into that whole world, so I took him to see it. If you're a fan of the franchise and the games and the books, you're going to love the movie. If you are unfamiliar with the world, as I am to a degree, I found the movie to be enjoyable. Wasn't perfect, had a bunch of problems with it. I think what people fail to remember is the movie's PG-13. It's made for kids. So if you've got kids that are interested in dabbling into the genre of horror, this is a good one to start with, because people die in this movie, but you don't see really any of it. You see a couple bodies, but nothing gory, nothing crazy. And I think it's almost like a good gateway to get into the genre for kids. And, so my experience with the movie, seeing it in the theater, I'm a little biased because my son was sitting next to me and he was like vibrating in his chair the entire time. He was so excited for the movie. And like, again, if you see it with someone who's a fan of the franchise, or you see just in the theater with fans, they're very lively and they're very into what's going on. I thought Josh Hutcherson did a great job in the film. I thought that the music score was actually pretty cool. I just wish they would have gave us more of the music. And I thought, Jim Henson's Creature Shop did the animatronics. They crushed it. These things look fantastic. And I will say, sound editing in this movie, the sound design was top notch, because you bought the weight of these characters. They're supposed to be these really heavy steel animatronics, and you totally got that from the sound in the movie. So I think they did a great job. Overall, it's a fun little watch. It's available on the Peacock now, if anyone's got the Peacock. If you want to check it out, it's a fun one for the kids to get them into the horror genre.
And what was your wild card this week?
My wild card was Panic Room by David Fincher. So I think I'm probably the only human who didn't know it. So, so the story, I think everybody knows, but the story, it's a divorced woman played by Jodie Foster with her daughter, Kristen Stewart. They just moved in a new house, and the first night, three guys broke in the house because they're looking for money hidden in a secured room. And the daughter and the mother, they go to this secured room when they understand that there are three invaders in the house. So they are stuck in the room, and the guys do what they can to enter the room to get the money back. So that's the story. So I love this movie. I didn't know about it. I love David Fincher, so maybe I'm really not objective, but it's a psychological thriller, like he knows how to do them. So it was very great from the beginning to the end. You feel the tension. You have an amazing cast. So as I said, Jodie Foster, Kristen Stewart, Forest Whitaker, and the amazing Jared Leto. So yeah, I really love the movie. Even the end is, I had a tear at the end. What I really enjoyed also on this movie is the way they shot the dark scenes, because what I hate the most is when a story is from all along, it's in the night. Sometimes you don't really see clearly things, and that's what I really loved on this movie. The technical aspect on the shootings, you can clearly see every scenes. And of course, I guess it's an emblematic, iconic shot when, the camera goes from vertical to horizontal on Jodie Foster. It's really a magical shot, at least.
Yeah, I remember seeing this film in the theater when it came out. That's, I think, the only time that I actually saw it. I don't recall much of the film. I remember the cast, I remember the setup, the situation, everything you explained, but I could not tell you the ending, and you don't have to tell me the ending now. I remember it came out, it was Fincher's next film after Fight Club, and so I was on such a high from Fight Club. So when I went in to see this movie, I just remember being disappointed, but I think it was because of that high. So I would be curious to check this one out again. I do like Jodie Foster and much of the other cast. And Fincher, for me, I feel like sometimes he's hit, sometimes he's a miss, but I'm willing to give this one the benefit of the doubt and revisit it. Very happy that you enjoyed it. I don't think you enjoyed every movie we watched this month, so I'm glad you had a good pick for yourself there.
Maybe you should re-see it, because now you're a parent. I think it's more interesting with your point of view as a parent, because in many moments I was like, what would I do if I were Jodie Foster? Because I didn't say it, but her daughter is diabetic and she's having a crisis in the secured room. but she can't go out because there are the burglars. So it's really interesting the way she deals with this.
Yeah, and now that you said that, like it's coming back, like I'm seeing it. So yeah, I'm sure I'm gonna have a very different experience watching it this time.
Yeah, I'm gonna revisit it too. I love Fincher. He's one of my favorite directors. I own all of the movies, so I think the only one I haven't seen is that last one he put out with Gary Oldman.
Mank.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one yet, but everything else I've seen. So yeah, I saw Panic Room one time. I remember really enjoying it. I bought it, so I think I have to go open it and and revisit it.
Okay, cool. Well, yeah, I also had an interesting pick this week. I'm not sure if either of you have ever seen this film, but it came to me as a recommendation from a friend earlier this month. And the film I selected was As Above, So Below. It came out in 2014, so it's not very old, but it's not exactly new anymore. It's a found footage film, which again, I'm not the biggest fan of. However, I will say that they utilized it very well. The setup for this film is basically she's not so much a treasure hunter as she is sort of an archaeologist, and her father kind of put her down this path. And so she's searching for the Philosopher's Stone, which is not a reference to Harry Potter. She's searching for this object and she tracks it down in the catacombs of Paris.
Hey.
So they enter the catacombs of Paris, and it's basically a journey through hell. And if you've ever read Dante's Inferno, you will pick up on all of the nuances that they put into this particular story. I thought they did a very clever job of weaving that story into this story and this setting. I realized as it was going on what they were getting at and what they were doing and how they were doing it. And so by the time I got to the end of the film, I was pleasantly surprised, and I thought it was a lot of fun, and it was just a different approach to that classical epic poem, you know, the Divine Comedy. And to just see a fresh presentation of the story really was very exciting and interesting. The characters were great. They were very believable. It's kind of a mixed cast. You have an American man, Welsh woman who's the lead protagonist, and then a bunch of French supporting cast members. So again, it's set primarily in Paris in the catacombs. And Anne, I would be very curious for you to check this one out and let me know what you think about it, simply because you live in Paris, and I don't know if you've ever been to the catacombs.
Yeah, waiting 3 hours outside to enter a room where you have skulls all around. Thank you, but no thank you.
So you want to go in the coffin, if I'm correct, right? You want to go in the coffin, but you don't want to go in the room
Yeah,
with the
that's
skull.
true. It's more comfy. But I've just seen that there is one of my favorite actors in that movie, François Civil. It's a very fantastic French actor. So yeah, I want to see it now.
Oh yeah, he was fantastic in the film. He played Papillon. He's very good. He was like one of the high points of the film for me. I mean, again, the whole story was just, it was very well done. I loved the way that they approached the found footage aspect of it. I don't know that it was totally necessary. It was kind of gimmicky to do it found footage style. However, their approach to it was very good. They had basically set it up that they were making a documentary about this character's pursuit of the Philosopher's Stone. And then during the course of their trip into the catacombs, they put little pin cameras on all of their headlamps. So then they have different feeds to work with in their documentary. And it made it a lot more interesting to have multiple camera angles. It was a very good and clever way to tell this kind of a story. But I highly recommend this one. Again, it's not the greatest film, but if you're interested in alternative horror, which is what I will classify this as, or if you've actually read Inferno as part of the Divine Comedy, then I would definitely recommend it, because it is a unique contemporary telling of that story. It can be a little disorienting simply because it is handheld and they are in the catacombs, and the way that the story unfolds, there's kind of an inverse of settings, but again, that ties into the story that it's based upon. So again, As Above, So Below, very interesting. Glad I picked it, and I hope everybody gets a chance to check it out at some point. With that, our final batch of films, which personally I didn't get to see this week. Some things came up for me. However, we will be delving deeper into the Ghostbusters in our VHS film recommendation series coming up on our YouTube channel next month. I don't know exactly when the Ghostbusters episode will happen, but it will be happening because that is one that I think most people should see and check out. And then, of course, we will discuss the franchise in association with it. And if there is the new film, the sequel to Afterlife, Ghostbusters Firehouse, will be coming up in March. So maybe we'll revisit it again down the line in March of this coming year. However, Anne did get to check out both of the first films in this franchise this week. So, Anne, what was your experience with Ghostbusters 1 and Ghostbusters 2?
Oh, I loved it.
Right answer.
I think I said last week that I only saw the cartoon, but actually, when I watched the first one, I was like, "Oh yeah, the Bib and monster, I remember." And in the second one, the Statue of Liberty, yeah, I remember, of course. So actually, yeah, I was a kid when I watched them, and I watched them on TV. And maybe you don't know, but in France we have films very late on TV. So when I was a kid, I couldn't watch the whole film, I guess, because it starts at 9:30 p.m. So it's quite late for a kid. It's not a horror movie. It's a family movie that you have pleasure to watch at any age.
Yeah, the Ghostbusters films, they are a lot of fun, especially for the Halloween season. Like Anne said, I do also agree that they're kind of family fun, sort of in line with like the Addams Family. You know, it's fun for everyone. You don't have to be a boy or a girl or young or old to enjoy the Ghostbusters. It's kind of just universal. Steven, a few quick words on the Ghostbusters.
Excellent. Man, I can't get enough of the Ghostbusters. Obsessed as a kid. I'm still obsessed as an adult. They're a deep part of who I am. They're a deep part of my childhood. Ghostbusters, the original, might be my second favorite movie of all time. I think it might be number 2 right behind Back to the Future. So, yeah.
I have a very distinct, vivid memory of seeing Ghostbusters 2 in the movie theater when it first came out in the summer of 1989. And I believe that is the second film that I ever saw in the movie theater. So for me, yeah, Ghostbusters, it is a part of my core foundation in film, in cinema, and just in entertainment and fun. And I'm curious though, were there any moments for you? I mean, of course, you're a grown woman, but were there any moments that kind of made the hair on the back of your neck stand up? Or like, were there any scary moments for you in this film or film series?
Yeah, there is one actually. Great question. There is one because I prefer the first movie than the second one. But the creepiest moment for me when Sigourney Weaver, she has like arms going out from the chair she's sitting on, and I don't know if you remember that scene. And it's super creepy because she's alone. She just hang up with her mother. So you don't expect that she's getting assaulted by by a demon. It's kind of realistic for women. I mean, I'm a woman watching this. It's unfortunately women are more assaulted than men, and yeah, I felt for her. It was quite creepy on that in that scene.
That is the scene when I was a little kid. That was the scene that always scared me. That was the one where I kind of had to like cover my eyes or hide behind the pillow or under the blanket. That was the one when the arms come out of the chair and grab Sigourney Weaver. It's still a pretty terrifying scene. I mean, it's shot very well. It's set up very well, especially the way they have like the terror dog's head pressing against the door. And you just see the look on her face like shit just got real, you know? And then it just comes out of nowhere. Like you're not expecting it to come from within the chair that she's sitting in, you know, maybe from behind or from the side, but not from like up and under. So it was just a very, very well done scare. In the second film, the scene that always got me when I was little was the bathtub.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When the bathtub comes alive and tries to grab Sigourney Weaver and her little boy.
Yeah.
That was the one in part 2 that always got me when I was younger. I was like, that's kind of creepy. I want to see it, but I don't want to see it right now because I got to go in the bath or I got to go to sleep.
Yeah, those two are always very effective. But I think as I've gotten older, one of the scares that I think most people overlook or don't think anything of it is in part 2 when Egon and Ray are developing the pictures of Vigo and they're discussing what they want for dinner and they get locked in and the place starts to go on fire. That's kind of like Vigo had some reach with that. I mean, he really, and then Winston comes and saves the day, like as he does. But that's kind of intense. So I think people kind of overlook that one a bit.
Mm-hmm. Overall, though, I mean, the first two films are a lot of fun. They are kind of reflections of each other, especially in terms of structure, but I don't care.
Me either. Me either.
They are a lot of fun, and again, it's the characters that make it fun, and I don't think they could have done a better job. I know they had originally intended for different actors to be involved. We'll talk about that in our later podcast revisit of this particular film. But Anne, I'm glad you got to see 1 and 2. I think I speak for Steve and I when we recommend Afterlife as a follow-up for that, the newer one. It does take it in a little bit of a different direction, so you might enjoy that element as well. And then it could set you up for the new film that's coming out in March, so then we can all revisit it again together. I think that about does it for this week. Overall, I think it was a very entertaining week on my end. I know not everybody loved everything, and I don't know that I particularly loved everything, but I think Misery was a highlight for everyone. Burke and Hare was a pleasant surprise, and I think we all enjoyed our own wild cards. And The Ruins, I think, defied some expectations, although it fell a little bit short. Overall, I think this week was a win, and to go out with the Ghostbusters, I mean, you can't do much better than that, especially at the Halloween season. So does anybody have anything they're looking forward to this week? I know this coming week we've got a short week. Today we have Oculus, which is a Mike Flanagan film. In addition to Oculus, tomorrow night we have Bubba Hotep, which is Bruce Campbell, Ozzie Davis, directed by Don Coscarelli, who also did Phantasm. So I have not seen that one in about 15 years. And then we follow it up on Halloween night with a double feature, The Abominable Dr. Phibes and Dr. Phibes Rises Again. And it would not be Shocktober for me personally without Vincent Price. So I had to double down on the day. I hope you guys can track those down and join the discussion. But of those 4 films, are you guys looking forward to anything in particular, or are you just going along for the ride at this point?
Going along for the ride. I haven't seen any of those movies, so that should be interesting.
Like Steve, I don't know any of them, so it's going to be a surprise.
Okay. I've seen the Dr. Phibes films, but not for a long time. I've seen Bubba Hotep, but not for a very long time. And Oculus is a new one to me, so I'm most looking forward to checking that one out tonight. From what I've seen of Mike Flanagan, I've really enjoyed his work thus far, so this is kind of one of the missing pieces of that puzzle. So I'm looking forward to checking out Oculus. I guess that about does it for this week. So again, you can catch Steve over on Instagram at Steve's Pop Culture Corner. Anne and I are both on Letterboxd, and you can see what we've been watching. And so until next week, enjoy.